Hello friends, we'll be discussing certain accounting terminologies which are related to royalty accounts. So when we speak about accounting terminology, we are basically trying to explain you what are the certain terms that we have under royalty accounts. So let's figure out one by one. Now, the first terminology that we have here is the agreement or lease. Now, this is the agreement that is signed between the lessor and the lessee. Lessor being the one who gives away the right, and lessee being the one who uses these rights. So, the kind of agreement they have, that agreement is termed as lease. Now, whenever this kind of lease is being used, you need to understand that whenever certain leases are being used or any agreement is being made under royalty accounts, that agreement is known as a lease here. And the parties to the contract, or rather the parties to the agreement, will be lessor and lessee. Now, the next parameter that we will be discussing here is the rent. Now, in royalty account, there is one parameter, or rather we can talk about one stringent parameter whereby there is a rent and there is a royalty. Now, these two parameters are considered every time whenever you will be facing royalty accounts. So, either or rather, there are two cases that we can discuss here. Minimum rent is something that the person who is giving away his rights is bound to receive, no matter whether you're earning anything on the basis of the rights that you're using it or anything else. But this is certain rent that is supposed to be provided to this. For example, if you're taking a flat, or rather if you're taking a shop on rent, and there is certain fixed rent that you're supposed to pay to the landlord. Now, whatever sales happen or it doesn't happen, will it stop you paying from the rent, or will it stop the person or the landlord taking rent from you? Of course not. The reason being, this rent is supposed to be taken at any cost. So, when we discussed about this specific rent, that means whenever you take a shop on rent, that rent is supposed to be provided no matter whether there's any sale that happens or it doesn't happen. So this is the basic rent that is supposed to be given. So in royalty accounts as well, this is the minimum rent that the lessee is supposed to provide it to the lessor no matter whether the sales or the output comes or not. So this is the minimum rent that happens. Now, the other part is the actual royalty that happens on the basis of the sales or on the output. So whatever agreement ratio they have, as per that, if they're earning any royalty, now there will be a comparison in between. So there are two cases that we would like to discuss. So the case one is where minimum rent is greater than actual rent. That means in any year, if the minimum rent is more than the actual royalty earned, in that scenario, lessor will claim minimum rent. So this is what they are going to talk about, or this is what happens whenever minimum rent and actual royalty is supposed to be compared. Now the next phase is where minimum rent is less as compared to the actual royalty. That means they've earned more royalty. Then in that scenario, the lessor will claim actual royalty. So to give you a gist of this rent, whichever is higher will be claimed by the lessor. Now here the lessor can be a landlord as well. So we can mention that the landlord will claim either of this amount. Now the next phase is short workings. Now that refers to excess of minimum rent over actual royalty. That means in that year, actual royalty didn't happen much as compared to the minimum rent. So in such a scenario, when actual royalty didn't happen much, that means that term is known as short working, whereby you can say that the case one of the rent where minimum rent is greater than actual royalty, that is known as short workings. Now, the next or the last terminology that we have to discuss here is the recoupment of short working. Now, recoupment basically means adjustment of short working. Whatever short working we have gone through, we need to adjust that short working. Now, how that happens is what we are going to understand in this terminology. Now, we'll first explain what recoupment means. Now, recoupment means it is an adjustment or carry forward of the current short workings against the future scenario where we find out that actual royalty is greater than minimum rent. That means the scenario in near future where we figure out that the actual royalty is greater than minimum rent, then whatever shortcomings we have in the previous years, we adjust them against that. So whatever additional we have, we adjust them against that, and that is known as recoupment of short working. Now this is one of the parameter. Again, there are two cases in between, or rather two rights of recoupment. One is a fixed right, second is a floating right. So the first, that is fixed right. Under that, lessor promises lessee that he will compensate for the loss or for the short working for a fixed time. It may be like for this year, lessor will promise lessee that for this year shortcoming, if there is any, then I'll compensate for that. Now that is a fixed right, or rather a fixed promise that is given by lessor to lessee. On the other hand, there is a floating right as well. Now, the next right that we have in question is the floating right. So, floating right basically means that the lessor promises the less that he will compensate for the short working for any one of the year out of 2 or 3 years. So, let's take for example, if 3 years probably short working has happened, so he will compensate for any one of the year. That means lessor has given this promise for any one of the year he will compensate. So that means there is no fixed time or no fixed period that he has to take into consideration. So this is what the counting terminology for royalty account comes into the picture. The agreement, the lease, the minimum rent, dead rent, and the short workings and the recoupment of short working. These are the four basic terminologies that we have to understand. And whenever you go ahead with the problems, you will have all these terminologies in your questions as well. So thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned with Ekeeda and keep subscribing to Ekeeda.